Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 4 of The Midnight Club. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, we're immediately picking up in the aftermath of last episode. Ilanka's down there by herself, but not for long before Kevin came back down. She keeps seeing specifically that old lady, so that old lady must have like some deep ties to this place, because when they were all investigating the place, we ended up finding a book of the Midnight Club, and apparently some of them used to come, this is actually used to be their meeting spot. So, cause I'm curious amongst this group, who was the one that introduced the others to them, cause it's a slow rotation of, people died and like those ranks kind of got filled in. So it seems like, once again, I believe it's, is it Sandra and Anya are the ones who've been here the longest? But I think they've only been here like a couple, like 6 months, I believe, if I remember correctly. So I am curious, because everyone who probably brought them in had passed away at some point in time and stuff like that, right? Because it's probably, like I said, been a very slow rotation. So it's probably been rare for an entire group to discover everything. But we end up finding out that the person that Ilanka's taken such an interest in, she's been taking this deep dive down, it's been Julia. She's the one that originally started the Midnight Club back in 69 or something like that. Might have been probably earlier. It was a couple years earlier than that, right? Might have been 69, I don't remember. Didn't she leave in 70 something? Because she was only, I think, there for a year. I'm getting a lot of the dates mixed up. Either way, so I thought that was interesting. They never really went, because the further they went in the book, eventually the back pages were just covered in blood. So I wondered, did eventually, after they did all that they did, whatever it was, they were the last group down there. And because they even wrote down some of their stories that they told. So I am curious, were they the only group of the Midnight Club? Or because we only focus really on their group, but maybe there were a few groups, but the later pages were just blood. So that's why, I guess, after that, this place had been abandoned for so long, because, maybe Julia and them were the last ones down here. But they had suggested, maybe this room might have even existed before then. It wasn't just, something in the 60s. It's this place might even existed, in the 50s. So maybe the ghost that Ilanka's been seeing has something to do with this place. You find the knives down there, the symbols, the bloody pages. It's and even found the robes. It's oh, cool. Which we know Ilanka had a dream about the robes. So I'm wondering, was that the OG Midnight Club she saw? Was the one that popped up behind her in her dream last episode, was that Julia? Because she was kind of the head honcho of all of this. Or was that some older cultist? So that's what this is all dealing with. At the heart of it all is the occult. So maybe that's how Julia got better. I mean, we don't know. Maybe she sacrificed the others, or maybe sacrificed one person to make herself feel better. So, who knows? So, they've got that all in mind. Sandra left with most of the group. The only ones that stayed behind were Anya, Ilanka, and Kevin. I guess they're the most interested in all of this crazy stuff. But then, during the next session, everyone's kind of exhausted. No one talked. But Sandra did. And her talking about, she was basically insinuating, right, we're all trying to find some escapism to our circumstances. We should kind of lean into God and not something we should be messing with. But that conversation started slipping into a bad place because she started talking about what's right and what's wrong, and it pissed Spence off, because he's did your God tell you what's right and wrong? What makes God be able to determine that? Because she's coming at it from a place of him challenging her faith and stuff. And this is where we get into that complicated territory, because he is from a religious background, but he's your faith, I know people your faith ended up taking my family away from me. He's the fact is my own mother disowned me and stuff like that, which we kind of got bits and pieces of that last episode. So of course these two characters would have the biggest issues, because I think with everything Spence is going through right now, I think Sandra saying all that just agitated him even more. And that's where we kind of get into that territory, and it's something I've talked about recently. It's not an all across the board thing. The fact is that, there are people who are religious and have faith who do not follow that whole thing of being anti, anything LGBTQ plus related, But there are people who are religious who probably may lean towards that, and that's what I think pissed Sandra off, because it's like, because Spence was going on about things not being so black and white, that there are shades of gray. And I think that's also what Sandra's saying, like, what's so wrong with things being so black and white? And the fact is that it's not just Spence saying all that he said, but also Anya jumping down her throat beforehand. It's like, yeah, like, it's kind of shitty, which I love that that's all Kevin took away from that. He's like, well, she said shitty. It's just because, like, she doesn't curse or anything like that. I mean, even last episode, what did she say? It's like, oh, she was led by her hoo-ha, so that's the kind of person that Sandra is. And so, but like I said, we found out more about Spence's circumstances, and Mark opened up to him, being like, yeah, I know what it's like, just because someone's nice, because he's like, yeah, I saw your dad, and haven't seen him in the past couple of visits, but says, like, just because someone's nice doesn't make them wrong. He's like, my dad and my family kind of blew a casket the moment I came out. So I was like, oh, Mark is too. So I think, but Spence's circumstances are like, the medicine isn't working as much, but it's like, don't worry, like, they're working on some stuff that's more, like, even more antivirals. And it's like, well, how long will that take to get to us? It's like, they're in the middle of making it so, like, they are making more and more advancements in antiviral stuff. And he's like, yeah, it'll be maybe another year or two. And Spence probably feels like, no, I don't have that much time. It's like, oh yeah, like, this will have killed me before then. But Mark is like, I know people who are in worse conditions who have lasted longer. So he's like, yeah, I've seen people pretty bad who've stuck around for a long time, so you don't have to worry. But then he also had that experience, because I'm assuming he walked by Tristan's room, and that's when the whole speaker thing happened, and he touched the door and it was locked. I was like, okay, that's weird. And then, like, the voice, like, responded to him, called him Spence. So I don't know if that was Tristan or not. But the moment he told Mark to open the door, it opened. So I'm like, okay. He didn't talk to anyone about it this episode either, because he's probably thinking, like, maybe he was out of his mind. Maybe it's like, probably like, just like Alanka, she talked to Kevin about it, but Kevin was a little dismissive at the time. So maybe, Spence was probably thinking, like, I'm just being crazy. I'm just hearing what I want to hear. So maybe little by little, Tristan from the other side is responding. So I also thought it was kind of a neat moment between Ilanka and her, like, putting makeup on Kevin. Yeah, to make him, like, look better for, like, the prom, because he had missed his prom, and Ilanka's like, yeah, I missed mine too. If I knew, hindsight's 2020, right? Know what you knew then, what you know now, would have acted upon it and actually gone, And so Kevin's going because this is Catherine's, and she is so excited about it. So everyone's kind of cheering him on. But even Spence is kind of the realist amongst the group, being like, oh yeah, what's going to end up happening is so many people are going to gather around, give him so much sympathy and pity, and there's going to be people sitting on the stairs crying. He's like, yeah, they're probably even going to name him give him, like, king of the prom or whatever, just because it's like, right, it's like no one in that situation wants pity. It just makes it that much worse. It's like, treat me like you normally would under those circumstances. And the sad thing is, Spence nailed it. He knew, like, I guess because, truth be told, is human beings, when it comes to someone sick, we're very predictable in that regard. Like, I think we generally don't know as a society really how to, like, because we feel like we have to walk on eggshells around someone. I don't know. Maybe it varies from person to person. Like, I don't even have any full answers of, like, how you. I mean, every person will probably tell you, like, how you should respond, but it's like, that's how do you broach that conversation with people, like, oh yeah, I want you to treat me like me and not like I'm some broken toy that you have to be fragile with, that you have to once again walk around on eggshells for. So it sounds like a lot of, like I said, the stuff that Spence said seems like it ended up coming true. Then there's the whole circumstances with Alanka, where it just kind of made her go, she's happy for Kevin and hopes he does have fun, but it all kind of got her thinking, putting makeup on him. It's like, she is like, right, the fact is that we have to put on this makeup just to look like ourselves, or at least how we see ourselves. And she admits, like, yeah, the one thing I miss is, like, my hair, and that's kind of got to be, that's a pretty rough thing. Then, like, we hard cut to, like, her, like, in the middle of the night vomiting and throwing up. And that is that complicated thing. She's like, oh yeah, I'm taking medicine that should block nausea, but it has a side effect of causing nausea. I'm like, that's fucking ridiculous. That's crazy. But it's like, oh yeah, Anya's trying to help. It's like, hey, here's some morphine, and she makes like some puns, and she's like, yeah, I better be careful, I'm so funny, like Lauren Michaels will come and get me. And it's like, come on, you need to be careful with all those drugs, because they hand those out very specifically, and if you take more than necessary, it's not safe. And it's like, oh, she's like, if I wanted a downer, I would have stolen. And she stops and she's like, fuck, morphine is a downer. Well, the joke is ruined. I once again, it's like she can be so mean and nasty, but it's like at the same time you're also like, oh, like you love to hate Anya, like you're kind of like, oh, you can be so mean sometimes, but now knowing like, right, you are a very caring person at heart, and you're kind of a dark person in regards of like your humor. I mean, how everyone deals with their circumstances, so. But like the morphine stuff, like you can tell it was getting bad throughout the episode, just because like later near the end of the episode, she was like at the table when they're telling stories, and she was nearly like passing out. So I was like, that doesn't look good. So I actually thought because of Spence's encounter earlier in the episode that it was going to be his story this time around, but it turned out it wasn't. It was actually Sandra was like, no, let me be the one that kind of takes age here. And they're like, oh, I don't think we have time for like your angel point. She's like, it's not going to, in fact, it's a detective story, murder mystery. We have Stanton back as the detective. And the moment it turns into a story of like, right, what was it? It was Kevin as her ex, and Ilanka as her best friend, Natsuki as like the mean popular girl, and Spence as her best friend. I might have said Sharon was Ilanka's character of Sharon was her best friend. Was like, I mean, that was just a really good friend, but Spence's character was her bestie. And the moment she put her bestie and her ex together in the story, and Spence is like, "What? Wait, you're really gonna tell this story after?" She's like, "Don't worry, like it happens for a reason." And so he ended up telling this story in his journal, and then it got plastered everywhere. And Kirk, Kevin's character, didn't stick up for him and just kind of like ran away and denied the whole thing. So. At first, it seemed like Queen Bee, mean popular girl, is the one responsible for it. And so, like, he was kind of ridiculed and everything. He's like, oh, they're trying to kill me. He's like, so why don't I settle the score and actually let them kill me? Because this is all dealing with, hey, there's one person missing and there are two dead bodies, but it was a fire, so there's charred remains. So, the detective Fisher is asking, Sharon's character of, Alice, what happened, and she told this story. Basically, Spence's character wanting to get revenge, basically got into an altercation, faked his death, and then he was going to like, yeah, and they were like, oh, showed up back at school on Monday, and then Amish was like, yo, that is vicious, and everyone's like, wow, I did not expect that from you, Sharon. So the story keeps going, but there's twist after twist. I love that she was like, yeah, it's kind of a ghost story. And at first I was like, oh, is the Spence thing the ghost story? Because like while she's telling Stanton's the story, like she sees like a flash of, and I guess maybe she just thought that was her own guilty conscience getting at her. We'll talk about that in a second. But it turns out Kirk, Kevin's character, ended up dying because he went in after Spence's character and ended up dying in the process, drowning. And you're like, wow, that sucks. And it struck a chord with Ilanka's character, because it's like, right, she was hoping that when this was all said and done, because she had a big crush on Kurt, that when all this mess was clear, that maybe her and Kurt could pick up the pieces after the fact. But now, and she ends up telling Alice the truth about everything, and now it's believed, oh, Alice rode up to the cabin that her bestie was hiding out at, that Sharon's bestie was hiding out at, and ended up, no, I keep saying Sharon was Ilanka's character. I keep meaning to say Alice, I think, in those instances. Alice, says that, like, oh, Sharon went there and ended up killing him. So I went about saying, recapping this in the worst way possible. I do apologize. But I thought that was such an interesting turn of events. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So it's like, right, so Sharon's gone, she did all this, she's on the lam, is that what this is? But I felt like, no, there's something off about Alice. But then it turns out, hey, your bestie's actually alive. The swimsuit and oxygen tank he used to survive and, hide, swim away, like after falling overboard. He used that, climbed in a tub because Sharon actually came to him to be like, we need to confess what happened. She got shot in the back. And what made him figure out the whole truth that it was Alice behind everything is because, like, right, you're the only other person that Sharon would have told. Plus, he found one of those little toothpicks, and it's like one of her nervous habits. But it's like, it was a habit out of guilt that was driving that, because she was the one behind everything, not just killing Sharon. She's also the one that killed Kurt, knocked him unconscious so that he ended up drowning. She's also the one that printed the pages to the book, because for her, it was also her way to get, it was mainly about, well, it's because like her ex and her best friend were doing stuff behind her back, but it was also her way to get back at her ex, because it's like, he did me wrong. And she's like, oh, makeup can cover up a lot. At first I was like, I was like, oh my God. She like, cause she had talked about like covering something up, and I was like, are you going to like have bruises or something? Like, was he abusive? And then she wipes the makeup away, and they're like, whoa. A cold sore. Wait, you killed him because he gave her herpes? And everyone at the table was looking shocked, because even Spencer's almost like, wait, what? And she's like, well, yes, it's an STD. And Kevin's like, no, I get it. And she's like, so she killed him because of that? And she's like, yes. And Amish is smiling, being like, yes, he's super into this story. And so it turns out that's what this was all about. But her revenge ended up costing so much pain, And, it's like, right, she's kind of hoping at the very end that she could get her bestie's forgiveness. And she's kind of like going on this like soliloquy at the end about how like her need for revenge. Once again, when you're seeking revenge, you dig a grave, not only for the person you're going after, but yourself. And it's like, yeah, like I went about things this roundabout way, and I got my revenge, but at the same time, I ended up being my own undoing as well. So, but then at the end, it's Sharon and Kirk came back as angels, and then at the end, like Amish was almost about to say, holy shit, he's about to start clapping, but Natsuki stops him, and she's like, I'm sorry guys, like I went on this whole thing, and I said it was not going to be an angel porn. She's like, I don't know why I keep automatically going back to that. But the whole story was supposed to be a giant apology to Spence, because she's like, right, I'm sorry that people in my position in my faith have ever treated you like that, but I would never do it. Because for her, it's like, God is all about love, and God would never hate love and never like pick and choose about who they love. Like, because once again, it's the thing is like, right, we're all supposed to be God's children, right? So why would God pick and choose about like, well, you're gay, so that makes me not love you. In fact, you're an abomination in my eyes, So once again, like it's that complicated thing of like, right, I think you can have faith and still like support the beliefs that are your own that might contradict some of the beliefs of because like different people pull different things from religion. Obviously it gives them comfort in other regards, but I feel like you don't always have to 100% believe everything, maybe to be a good, Christian or whatever your respective religion is. You probably have to go like all in. You can't kind of pick and choose, but I think picking and choosing what you want to adhere to and what you don't want to. I mean, there's certain aspects of the Bible, I think people tend to do that anyway. They don't adhere to everything that's in the Bible, but still. So I just thought that was such an interesting thing, but I also thought it was kind of beautiful that the whole thing was her being like, I'm sorry, so, and kind of making it so that her character, like, it's like, yeah, I tried to kill you in the story, but in fact, I ended up dying in the process, and I'm apologizing at the very end. And Spence forgave her, so I thought that was beautiful, and Amish and everyone kind of giving her, clapping for her at the end. I thought that was great, so. Thought that was really nice. Some other things really quickly. I am curious what that lady's circumstances are. Once again, Beverly from Midnight Mass. Because Alanka keeps running into her. Obviously, she says like, "Oh, I have a very like small company, the good humor that like has like more like natural like medicine and stuff like that." That's what she's. Cause so I don't know if I wouldn't go as far as being like, but she feels like she's kind of very like hippie-ish, maybe hippie adjacent to some extent. So I'm like, oh, and once again, because I'm so because I think she's probably in other Mike Flanagan stuff too, but obviously Midnight Mass is the only thing other than this that I've seen of Mike Flanagan's. So all I have in my head is her as Beverly. So seeing her as this other character is so, it's such a weird adjustment for me. Because I'm like, if you've seen Midnight Mass, you know about Beverly's circumstances. Once again, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say her character's name was Beverly. But it's like, yo, that's a very specific character. And I can't shake that from my head because it's like, you know, it's the most recent thing I've seen her. And once again, it was like a little over a year ago. But still. So it just takes a weird adjustment of like, oh. But I'm also in the back of my mind, I'm like, are you going to pull a bit of a Beverly? You know, I mean, I think it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition considering who Beverly's character was, and you kind of contrast that with Sandra, which once again, I believe the actress who plays Sandra was also in Midnight Mass. I mean, along with Zach Gilford, who plays Mark. So that might not be the same actress who plays Sandra. I need to look into that. I was thinking that before, and I settled on thinking it was, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Once again, it's been over a year since I've seen Midnight Mass, so I could be mistaken. Either way, I just think it's just kind of an interesting thing considering like Sandra's like the religious person, and Beverly doesn't seem like that. She's a little. I mean, the actress who played Beverly in Midnight Mass, who's like she seems like her character seems a lot more free spirited in this, you know, so and not as rigid as Beverly was in Midnight Mass. So I don't know. That's definitely going to be interesting. And making the whole point of like, oh yeah, like this isn't like, she's also got like, she's like, yeah, this is actually my property where, you know, but she's like, yeah, you're invited here anytime you want to. Also like the security cameras and stuff. I'm like, there's something there. I just don't know if that lady's going to end up being sinister or not. But what I also love is that, Kevin and Ilanka figured out the numbers from Julia's stuff because she had talked to that lady about like, oh, you should read certain books in these sections and stuff. And then looking at it, like she figured out like, oh my God, it was the numeric values for like the books or whatever. It's like, oh, the 200s was like the Bible sections, like the religious section, which is interesting. That's where they found that book. You know, it's like, right, 292.13. It's like the 13th book in the 292nd section. So, which it seems like that might be like an occult book. So feels like very blasphemous to put that in a religious section. But, you know, I mean, maybe it even more so deserves to be there just because of, I mean, well, to be fair, like, once again, Midnight Mass, like, dealt heavily in the religious angles of, like, the supernatural and stuff, so maybe this kind of is leaning in that same vein, too. And then there was a situation with Anya, where, she, once again, like, I think her, like, over-medicating herself, at the end there, and then going back to her room, and then it's like, she was hearing the voices, and she kept saying, like, no, already going, but she's like, no, I'm still here, and then her shadow ends up attacking her, and by the time Kevin and Ilanka get back, her wheelchair's over, and it was like, they're shocked to see, like, I don't know if she's actually dead, and if she is, they're just going to allocate it as, like, oh, she overdosed, is what it's going to look like, because she had a whole bunch of morphine in her system, so it's like, that's sad if that ends up being the case, but it could just be like maybe she's in like a medically induced coma, or just maybe she's knocked out. Maybe they got to her in time. I'm curious to see, like, are they going to straight up kill Anya or not? We'll ultimately have to wait and see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.